Hi, my name is Louise Quick and welcome to Quick Histories, where today I've decided to take on Chat GPT, not only to test its historical knowledge, but also to ask, should I be worried that AI is going to steal my job? I hope not, but let's find out. Now, I'm a public historian, or I like to call myself a professional history nerd, and that means, well, it means a lot of things, but basically a big part of my job when I'm working on shows and productions is to create something called research packs. Now, these research packs are pretty much what they sound like. Big old documents full of well-researched and quality history notes on any bit of history that we might need. I've written up notes on all sorts of brilliant and bizarre corners of history, including the toilet habits of the Tudors, how Black Death victims were buried, and even trying to answer the question, was Einstein evil or a genius? I love my job. Creating these packs takes time, of course it does. And that's exactly why alarm bells started going off about a year ago when someone I was working with, a fellow assistant producer, basically explained Chat GPT to me and then warned me that it was coming for our jobs. I think he was joking, but if there is something out there that can produce research at the click of a button like that, shouldn't we be worried? First things first, what is Chat GPT? Don't start commenting about who doesn't know what Chat GPT is. People don't know what Chat GPT is. Google tells us that Chat GPT is a chatbot and virtual assistant which, based on large language models, enables users to refine and steer a conversation. I'm going to be honest, I'm not 100% sure what that means. My understanding of Chat GPT is that it's basically a super smart internet robot that scours the internet for answers and you can have a conversation with it. And also it's slightly terrifying and is making me worry that the end is nigh. Yeah, it's just that. Nothing to worry about. ChatGPT is part of artificial intelligence, or AI, and I'll be honest, up until now, my experience with AI is pretty limited to just asking it to make funny photos and images of cats dressed as Tudor monarchs, as well as this bonkers image of what it thinks Henry VIII would look like jet skiing around the Thames. So yeah, you're welcome. My question is, am I, and all historical researchers, about to be replaced by a super smart internet robot? So I thought it was about time that I introduced myself to this here Chat GPT, look it straight in the screen and basically see what I'm up against. I had to figure out what to ask Chat GPT about. As it happens, I recently produced a couple of videos for the brilliant History Hit YouTube channel, all about the first kings and queens of England. In fact, I'll drop a link in the description below to those videos. I do recommend you go check them out, possibly before watching this video to avoid any spoilers. But yeah, check them out, they're fun. But as that research is fresh in my mind, I thought that's a great place to start. I'll test ChatGPT on the early monarchs of England. So I hopped on ChatGPT and I asked it, hey, who was the first king of England? And it immediately spat out an answer about Athelstan. Now, at this point, I paused for a long time, I had a slight panic, and did question whether I should have trained as an accountant. And that's because this answer is so much better than I was expecting. Yes, it's short, but it's pretty accurate. Athelstan is generally recognised as the first real king of England. He was a king in the 10th century who is famous for uniting the Anglo-Saxon regions and moving up into Europe to create something that resembled the English nation. But ChatGPT doesn't just give me a name, it actually backs up its claim with a couple of historical points, and even gives a little nod to Athelstan's grandfather, King Alfred the Great, and his influence in sort of setting the foundation that Athelstan built on. What's more, its answers are written in a much more accessible way than I was expecting. The answers are relatively easy to read and understand, which is important when it comes to communicating history. It's almost more human than I was expecting. Once I had composed myself, I asked ChatGPT rather weakly, what about King Canute? So he was this great king, Viking king really, whose North Sea empire included England in the 11th century. Again, Chat GPT gave me a pretty solid answer about how Canute became king, how his reign is remembered, but ultimately how it believes that Canute was not the first king of England. At this point, I will just say a little side note, don't think this is absolute fact. Don't think that Athelstan is the first king of England, no questions asked at all, because there is some debate around this, but I'm going to touch on that later. So, just wanted you to know. Here, I try a slightly different tact, and I ask ChatGPT, who are the main contenders to be the first king of England? I was expecting it to not understand the question or maybe just repeat the spiel about Athelstan, but no, it instantly gives me what essentially looks like an essay plan of different contenders for the first king of England, which are basically early medieval kings from all around the same era. And it even has its own little conclusion where it doubles down on the fact that it believes Athelstan is most commonly recognised as the first king of England. Right, here's my first criticism of ChatGPT. It loves Athelstan, fine, but it feels like it's clinging on to just a couple of key points about him and just keeps repeating them. He unified nations and had great military victories. Yes, it's not that those are wrong, he did unify nations and he did have some great military victories, especially at Brandenburg. But can it not tell us something else about Athelstan? He was so powerful that he even had the kings of neighbouring nations, such as Scotland, pledging oaths to him. And at one point he called himself the Emperor of the World of Britain. He's a powerful guy. He's exerting influence not only over England, but over neighbouring nations like Scotland as well. Also, while I'm criticising, I will say that it feels like ChatGPT skims over the more complicated bits of history. For example, it mentions how Athelstan successfully united various Anglo-Saxon kingdoms to create an English nation. But it doesn't say how he nabbed York from the Vikings, which is kind of a big deal and a big part of his expansion. Similarly, it says how Canute ultimately secured his position as king following a series of battles. There was some battles and, he became king. Completely sort of skimming over those trickier details. Now, why is that? Is it the case that ChatGPT literally couldn't decipher those more complicated bits of history? Or did it sort of decide to skim over those complicated bits or oversimplify them for our benefit, to make it easier to understand? Because if so, that's almost smarter. I'm getting into the swing of it by now. So I next ask ChatGPT, who do you think was the first king of England? And I'm feeling pretty smug when it doesn't answer immediately. It actually takes a few seconds of deliberation. However, after those few seconds, it comes up with this big argument as to why Athelstan is the first king of England. Again, basically an essay plan, arguing why he was the first king of England. And this time, at least, it does have a little bit more detail on him. And then my conversation with ChatGPT came to an end because I'm a cheapskate and I was only using the free version, so I ran out of chat time. However, I was left feeling pretty nervous and also with the knowledge that ChatGPT is clearly a big fan of the Stan. That's Athelstan. Now, I've got some criticisms, but I'm going to leave those to the end. At this point, I was thinking, okay, maybe the question who was the first king of England was too straightforward a question. However, the question who was the first ruling queen of England is a slightly trickier question. The answer is a bit more contested. So I was thinking maybe ChatGPT will struggle a bit more with this one, might stumble at this hurdle. Maybe it struggles to deal with nuance and grey area. So I come back later when I have more of a chat allowance with ChatGPT and I ask it, hey, who do you think was the first ruling queen of England? And nope, no stumbling, no struggling. It just immediately tells me that it was Mary I, who was of course the Tudor queen, daughter of King Henry VIII, who ruled England in the mid-16th century before it was inherited by her sister, Queen Elizabeth I. So while this answer's coming up and I'm reading it, I'm thinking, hey, all right, yeah, Mary I, but what about Empress Matilda and Lady Jane Grey? And it's as if ChatGPT is reading my mind, because then it drops in the line, oh yeah, but there were some other female claimants. And when I asked it about the female claimants, yep, it gives me a rundown on Empress Matilda and Lady Jane Grey, who they were, when they were alive, what their claims are to being the first ruling queen of England. However, ultimately it says they weren't. Side note, I'm a big Empress Matilda fan, and I think she was robbed I say, by Stephen and his supporters. And if we're going to have, yeah, that's right, I've got props now. If we're going to have Stephen mentioned on like a list of monarchs on this, you know, ruler of rulers, if we're going to have Stephen on here, then why the heck isn't Matilda on there? Robbed. Anyway, I digress. At this point, I just start having a chat with Chat GPT. I'm asking it what makes someone a ruling queen of England, like is coronation absolutely essential, and if not, then why can't we count Lady Jane Grey or Empress Matilda? But the point is, it's giving solid, confident, worryingly smart answers to these questions. Buggerations. By now I'm just playing around and I try and think of something completely different to ask. So I ask ChatGPT, do you have any controversial opinions on historical topics? To which ChatGPT reminds me that it's AI and so it doesn't have personal opinions yet. Doesn't say yet, that was me. And then gives me 6 of what it believes are the most controversial opinions in history, or controversial opinions on historical topics. These include colonialism and the bombing of Hiroshima, as well as, quite an odd one, the true nature of the Roman Empire's fall. Like, really? As controversial as colonialism and the atomic bombing at Hiroshima? Sure, maybe. What is quite interesting is that it ends by talking about how history is, you know, differing interpretations and is a complex interplay of events, which feels sort of suspiciously open and free thinking for something that was so adamant that the first King of England was definitely Athelstan, no questions asked. Stop asking about Canute, it's Athelstan. So I've only dipped my toe in the Chat GPT pond, or data pool, as it were. And while it's much smarter and faster than I expected it to be, genuinely a bit of a shock, it's definitely not perfect. Yet. For a start, it's very mainstream in its answers. I don't mean to sound like a hipster criticizing someone's music taste, but yeah, like when you ask it who was the first King of England, it's just Athelstan. And even when I asked it for the contenders, you know, other contenders for the title of the first King of England, it never really moved out of that period of time. It was sort of Athelstan or Athelstan's close relatives. It didn't even mention the likes of Canute, Edward the Confessor, and William the Conqueror, 3 great 11th century kings who you might not think are right, but actually, you know, depending on your understanding of England, then they're definitely worth a mention, right? The fact that GPT gives such mainstream answers makes sense, though. It scours the internet for data and then gives you the most popular answer. At least that's how I think ChatGPT works. And if it is, then it makes sense that it would give you the most run-of-the-mill, down-the-middle answers to questions. So maybe ChatGPT isn't that great at the sort of nuance and grey areas of history. On the one hand, I feel like some nuance was there, like it knew to mention other female contenders to the title of first ruling queen of England. It knew to mention Lady Jane Grey and Empress Matilda, but I had to dig a little bit for it. I had to ask that follow-up question. And the thing is, I knew the questions to ask because, well, I know the answers. But if someone was coming at this completely cold, like didn't know anything and was looking for those answers, then they could be very easily persuaded into thinking there's just one strict black and white answer, and that's it. But maybe that's less a problem with ChatGPT and more a problem with the internet generally. Because I guess if they're not using ChatGPT, they're just using Google. However, one thing I did quickly realise is that although ChatGPT really clings to that sort of one answer of like either Athelstan or Mary I, it can be easily manipulated. For example, when I was asking it about the first ruling queen of England, although it was set or Mary I, once I asked it, or I told it, give me 5 reasons why Empress Matilda was actually the first ruling queen of England, it gave me a pretty solid case, pretty good actually, set of answers to back up that claim. So it can be manipulated away from giving you those sort of mainstream, middle-of-the-road answers, as long as you know what to ask. And I should say here, I'm not asking it to give wrong answers. I'm just a big believer in there being a grey area and a debate, especially around these questions of who was the first King of England, who was the first ruling queen of England. I don't think there is a set answer. I think it's an ongoing debate, depending on a load of different factors that I won't get into now. You should watch the videos I made for History Hit to find out more about that. One really obvious criticism or question to ask is this information even reliable? Where the heck does Chat GPT get its data from? It even has a caveat at the bottom of its page that says, Chat GPT can make mistakes, check important info. Like, how can we trust any of the information it provides? Despite the fact that from what I've seen, I haven't fact-checked everything word for word, but from what I've seen, the information it gave us was pretty accurate. But despite that, when researching history, you need to know that what you're producing is as reliable and as trustworthy as possible. You need references, ideally to gorgeous primary source material. Who knows where ChatGPT is getting these answers from? So, final thoughts. That was fun, terrifying, but fun. And it's got me thinking, is ChatGPT something to fear? Like, am I about to be replaced by a super intelligent internet robot? Granted, it's super fast and gives pretty solid answers, but it also feels like you need to know what questions to ask to get the best out of it. And then ultimately, how can we even trust anything that it says? It does feel a little bit like when someone who doesn't know anything, or has read the Wikipedia page of something, just talks to you really confidently about something, and you're like, maybe they're right. And it's like, no. Are they just talking with confidence, or are they talking with knowledge? I don't know. That's the kind of feeling I'm left with ChatGPT. It's a feeling that's quite familiar to a lot of first dates that I've been on, to be honest. So while it feels inevitable that AI is basically going to take over our lives, I don't feel worried yet that it's going to take the jobs of historical researchers like me. Just yet. Not right now, anyway. Rather than being like an enemy to work against, maybe it's more like a tool that we can work with. We can't trust or rely on what ChatGPT tells us, but maybe it could be used as a starting point to kind of inspire or direct research, a little bit like the way that some researchers use Wikipedia. Like, it's your first port of call to get some direction, some of that initial direction, but certainly not the source of your facts. What do you think? Do you use ChatGPT? And if so, how? And is it to be trusted? Let me know in the comments below. And remember to subscribe, follow me over Instagram at quick_histories. And if you've really enjoyed this video, please do consider buying me a coffee over on my Ko-fi page. It's always massively appreciated. And on the off chance that our future robot leaders are watching this, please note that I advocated that we work together and that you were not the enemy.